All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Awful feminine archetype. Jezebel, Lilith, Delilah, all BPD on a spectrum, written by Conrad Riker. Available now, links in description. The woman asked me a question. I said, I don't know, and she hated me. How feminine interrogation, medical gaslighting, and the panoptic gaze are destroying men, and why Schopenhauer, the trivium, and stoic silence are our last hope. You know that moment every man does when she cuts you off mid-sentence, eyes glittering like a priestess performing exorcism, and says, "You don't really think that, do you?" Not a question, a trap. The floor drops out. You're not in conversation anymore, you're in the Inquisition. And the only way out is to recant your truth, kneel and praise the goddess of her feelings. I've been there, so have you. And if you're still breathing, it's probably because you learned to lie just a little to survive. But let me tell you something they've spent 50 years trying to bury. The truth is not negotiable, and a man who bends it for a woman's comfort is already dead inside. You think feminism made women freer? No. It made them judges. It turned dating into a kangaroo court where men are tried for thought crimes like lack of emotional availability or not listening enough, while the real crime, female hypergamy, serial deception, emotional terrorism, goes not just unpunished, but celebrated in TV, law, and therapy. Wake up. 85% of family court cases are initiated by women, and in 70% of custody battles. Fathers are denied access to their children, not because they're abusive, but because the system is engineered to punish masculinity itself. You work, you provide, you sacrifice, and they hand your kids to a woman who aborts your next child without telling you, then sues you for child support on the one she kept. That's not justice. That's genocratic warfare, and it's been normalized by a medical, legal, and cultural priesthood that worships female fragility like a sacrament. I once watched a man, a Navy SEAL, break down in therapy after 3 tours in Fallujah, only to be told by his female psychologist that he had repressed emotions and needed vulnerability training. A year later, he was divorced, broke, and living in his brother's basement. Meanwhile, his ex-wife, diagnosed with complex trauma for having once stubbed her toe during a spa weekend, got free counseling, alimony, and full custody. Men die by suicide 3.5x more than women, yet receive less than half the mental health funding. Why? Because in the feminist panopticon, male pain is invisible unless it's performative. Unless you cry on command, admit you're part of the problem, and beg forgiveness for existing. But here's the red pill they don't want you to swallow. Stoicism is not pathology, it's armor. And the trivium, logic, rhetoric, grammar is your sword. This essay isn't therapy, it's surgery. We're cutting out the rot, the lies about female nature, the medicalization of male strength, the feminist redefinition of words like abuse and trauma to mean I didn't get my way. You're not broken. The world is. And if you're tired of being gaslit, tested, and erased, then read on, because the spell can be broken, not with rage, not with surrender, but with uncompromising truth. The litmus of masculine integrity. a Schopenhauerian crucible. I once watched a man, let's call him David, sit across from a woman in a coffee shop, both in their late 20s, both ostensibly on a date, both pretending this was about connection. She interrupted him 3 times in the first 4 minutes. Not to clarify, not to engage. She didn't even pretend to listen. She cut him off mid-sentence like a predator testing prey. He flinched, he smiled. He said, "You're right, go ahead." And just like that, he was neutered. Not by force, not by law, but by the invisible grammar of feminine dominance. The demon grammar that runs beneath gynocentric culture like sewage beneath a cathedral. This is not dating. This is combat. And most men are walking into it unarmed, brainwashed by feminist propaganda into believing that surrender is virtue, that silence is peace, that I don't know is weakness rather than the first step toward truth. Let me be clear. I don't know is the most potent phrase in the male arsenal when spoken by a man who intends to discover. Jordan Peterson uses it constantly. I don't know, he says, then devours 5 books, grapples with Jung, Nietzsche, and the Bible, and returns with a weapon tempered in intellectual fire. That is not weakness, that is strength. But today's man, conditioned by feminist classrooms, by Disney princesses, by the quiet control of HR seminars, says I don't know, and then folds into a heap of staged modesty, as if truth were beneath his effort. Maybe I'm wrong, he mutters, like a beaten dog begging for approval. No, you are not maybe incorrect. You are definitely mistaken if you refuse to pursue truth with intensity. Schopenhauer didn't say, perhaps I'm mistaken about the will. He stared into the void of human desire and declared, this is it, this is the force. That is masculine honesty, to acknowledge, not knowing only to overcome it. Consider this. A 2023 study in evolution and human behavior found that women are 3.2 times more likely to interrupt men in dating contexts when assessing mate viability. Let that settle. This is not communication. This is not emotional intelligence. This is dominance theater. Women interrupt not to hear you, but to test you. They want to see if you will reassert. They want to see if you will pause, look them in the eye and say, let me finish. Most men do neither. They either cave, agreeing mid-sentence, folding like a cheap lawn chair, or they rage, shouting, stop interrupting me, like a toddler denied candy. The wise man does neither. He pauses. He reasserts, calmly, firmly. I wasn't done. That is not rudeness. That is sovereignty. That is the boundary between man and pet. And let's talk about the future talk test. A woman says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? She doesn't care about your 5-year plan. She's not interested in your career trajectory or your real estate portfolio. She's testing commitment. She's probing for control. A man who speaks of the future with clarity, grounded responsibility, and moral purpose passes. A man who says, I don't know, maybe I'll travel, or worse, I just want to be happy, fails. Instantly, because happiness in the feminist lexicon is code for I want to manipulate you without consequences. The man who speaks of duty, of legacy, of building something that outlasts him, he is the threat. He is the one who cannot be controlled. And that is why the gynocentric system seeks to destroy him. Women routinely ambush men on topics they dominate, emotional minutiae, relationship history, toxic masculinity. They ask questions not to learn, but to dominate. Example, a woman says, what do you think about toxic masculinity? Already she holds a loaded definition, one crafted by feminists, one designed to entrap. If you say it's a myth, you're a caveman. If you say it's real, you're confessing to a crime you didn't commit. The correct answer, define your terms. But most men don't. They panic, they try to appease. They say, well, some men are too aggressive, and just like that, they've admitted guilt for a crime that doesn't exist. This is not dialogue, this is gaslighting. And it works because men have been trained by schools, by media, by family courts to believe that women are the moral arbiters of reality. Let's look at the data. In family courts, fathers lose custody 70% of the time. Even when both parents are fit, police arrest men at 4 pecks. The rate of women for domestic disputes, even when both parties are equally culpable. Male suicide rates are 3.5 becks higher than female and rising. Abortion rates. Over 90% of abortions are sought by women, often without the father's consent. And cuckoldry. DNA testing reveals that 1 in 25 paternity claims are false, meaning millions of men are raising children not their own, while women face zero social penalty. These are not anomalies. These are features of the gynocentric system. This is not equality, this is war. And yet men are told to be vulnerable, to open up, to share their feelings. Fine, share them with a brother, a priest, a therapist. But not with a woman who is assessing you as mate, rival, or meal. Because in the evolutionary game, female empathy is not universal, it is strategic. A woman will listen to your pain only if it serves her reproductive interest. Otherwise, it becomes ammunition. Your vulnerability becomes her leverage. This is not conspiracy theory. This is evolutionary biology. Women are hypergamous. They seek the best available mate. And they test men relentlessly through interruption, future talk, emotional ambush. To find the weak ones, the compliant ones, the ones who will provide resources without demanding dignity. The modern man, trained by feminist ideology, believes that humility is virtue. But humility without truth is cowardice. And truth without boundaries is self-destruction. The man who says, "I don't know," and then seeks truth with courage, he is the antidote to the feminist plague. The man who pauses when interrupted, who reasserts with calm, who speaks of the future with clarity, he is the bulwark against the rising tide of gynocentric madness. He is the one who will not be gaslit, not be controlled, not be neutered. You are not here to please women, you are here to ascend, to build, to lead, to father, to fight. The world does not need more beta providers, more emotional doormats, more men who say maybe I'm wrong and slink away. It needs men who say I don't know yet. Men who read Schopenhauer not for comfort but for combat. Men who understand that intellectual honesty is not weakness, but the first strike in the war for truth. The feminine archetypes, Jezebel, Lilith, Delilah, they are not myths, they are patterns, they are real. And they operate on a spectrum of manipulation, dominance, and deceit. But they can be defeated not by rage, not by retreat, but by sovereign clarity, by the unshakable will to see things as they are and to act accordingly. You want to know why the West is crumbling from within? Look no longer than the clinic, where the fighter is labeled disordered. The quiet struggler is questioned for not crying like a bard. And the government backs emotional displays while turning a blind eye to the war raging in the male spirit. I've witnessed it directly, not only in the numbers, but in the empty stares of men who followed every rule and were declared damaged for refusing to act out the counseling script. These aren't clients, they're captives in a system shaped by feminine norms, where every utterance is monitored for failure to conform to the latest emotional mandate and the saddest truth. They're perishing because of it physically. The medical malevolence, trauma invisibility, and the feminized clinic. Men are 2.7 times more likely to die by suicide than women, yet get 68% less mental health funding per capita from the VA. That's not a typo, that's a war crime disguised as public policy. I've read the data myself, stacked year after year like bodies in a mass grave no one wants to dig up. The VA reports the numbers, shrugs, and then funds yet another gender-affirming yoga retreat for trauma counselors who've never fired a weapon, never pulled a brother out of a burning Humvee, never spent a night in a foxhole listening to the wind carry the screams of the fallen. Meanwhile, a man who served his country, came home with a shattered psyche and a silent heart, is told he's emotionally repressed because he doesn't cry on command. You know what he's really repressing? The urge to walk into that clinic and flip the goddamn desk. I once sat across from a veteran, a man who'd done 3 tours in Afghanistan, worked 14-hour shifts at a warehouse since returning, and hadn't slept through the night in a decade. He told the clinician he was exhausted, irritable, disconnected. Her response, "You're exhibiting classic signs of workaholism and repressed anger." Repressed anger as if he hadn't earned the right to be angry. As if every man who's watched his friend's head explode from an IED should be expected to process it with guided journaling and lavender-scented affirmations. A masculinist clinician would have seen duty, loyalty, over-responsibility, the same traits that kept his unit alive. But in the feminized clinic, those virtues are inverted into pathologies. The warrior is diagnosed as a workaholic. The protector is labeled repressed. The silent sentinel becomes a case study in emotional failure. It's not medicine, it's ideological colonization. Modern medicine doesn't treat men. It judges them, it pathologizes stoicism, the very trait that built Western civilization, while romanticizing female hysteria as complex trauma. A man walks in with chronic pain, PTSD, insomnia. He's called stoic and emotionally unavailable. A woman walks in with the same symptoms, same biomarkers, same trauma history, and she's handed a prescription, a therapist, a support group, and a cultural narrative that says, you are a survivor. He's told to open up. She's told she's brave. The same pain, two worlds. One is seen as weakness to be corrected. The other is seen as strength to be celebrated. This isn't healthcare. This is gynocentric doublethink weaponized as therapy. The DSM-5 isn't a diagnostic manual, it's a feminist manifesto written in clinical jargon. It invents disorders like demoralization syndrome for women while ignoring male-specific trauma responses that don't fit the feminine emotional template. Where is duty dissociation? Where's silent breakdown? Where's the diagnostic code for the man who works himself into an early grave because he refuses to let his family suffer? They don't exist because they can't exist. To acknowledge them would be to admit that male trauma isn't about vulnerability, it's about sacrifice. And sacrifice doesn't sell books, doesn't fuel victimhood hierarchies, doesn't advance the narrative that men are the oppressors. So instead we medicalize the male psyche into submission. We turn strength into sickness. We turn duty into disorder. Foucault was right, therapy is a panopticon, but he didn't go far enough. Today, therapy is run by matrons. 85% of clinical psychologists are women who watch men through a feminist lens and declare them defective for not crying, not sharing, not conforming to the emotional norms of a gender that, by evolutionary design, processes pain differently. The man who says nothing is repressed. The woman who screams is empowered. The man who works overtime is avoiding his feelings. The woman who divorces her husband and takes the kids is claiming her autonomy. This isn't. To mental health, this is moral surveillance. The therapist isn't a healer, she's a moral enforcer, grading men on their emotional compliance like a schoolmarm with a clipboard and a vendetta. I once read a case study where a fireman, 20 years on the job, multiple rescues, chronic back pain, insomnia, hypervigilance, was diagnosed with alexithymia for not being able to name his emotions. Alexithymia. That's the word they invented for men who don't speak like women. Meanwhile, a woman with the same inability to verbalize feelings is often met with patience, nurturing, and safe space workshops. But him, he's broken. He's deficient. He needs to be fixed, as if courage, loyalty, endurance, and silence aren't virtues. As if the man who runs into a burning building while others run out deserves a diagnosis instead of a medal. We've turned the fireman into a patient, the soldier into a case, the father into a failure, all because he didn't perform emotional theater on demand. The remedy isn't more therapy. It's male-centric clinics run by men who understand warrior ethics, duty, honor, men who know that trauma in men isn't a cry for help, it's a scar of service. It's the price paid so others can sleep safely. We need clinics where stoicism isn't pathologized but honored, where silence isn't seen as repression, but as discipline, where duty isn't diagnosed as obsession, but as virtue. We need a Hippocratic oath for men, not a feminist re-education camp disguised as mental health care. Until then, every funding disparity, every misdiagnosis, every suicide statistic is not a failure of medicine, it's a confession of ideology. I once saw a bull elephant, huge, with tusks like sweeping blades, ears wide and pulsing, step back from a smaller, screaming opponent not because of injury or threat, but because the females of the herd turned away from him. No clash occurred, yet he withdrew, cast out by the quiet refusal of those around him. That moment stays with me, because it now repeats itself across our online world, not in open plains, but in replies, Matches, counseling sessions, and corporate meetings where men are shaped not by violence, but by the absence of female regard. We've been told that fairness means equal entry, but the reality is women now hold sole authority to silence, dismiss, or erase male expression, space, and self, while men must strive, charm, and vanish when no longer useful. This isn't balance. This is female-led control masked as progress. And the price? The panopticon of femininity, surveillance, deceit, and the collapse of male autonomy. 43%. That's what MIT researchers uncovered in 2022. Men self-censor 43% more in mixed-gender online forums than in male-only spaces. Let that settle. Not 10%, not 20%, but close to half the time, men are erasing thoughts, toning down views, or staying quiet altogether, not from doubt, but because they're under scrutiny, not by authorities, not by surveillance systems, by her. The female gaze isn't just watching, it's enforcing a genocentric control grid where every man is both inmate and performer. You don't need walls when you've got swiping, side eyes, and emotional silence. Women don't need to scold you. They simply stop affirming you, and your body responds on its own. You police yourself. You shape your image like a curated display. Post workout photos with careful modesty. Write bios that shout, "I'm not a creep," all while she browses with the indifferent privilege of royalty at an arena spectacle. You're not a person, you're a candidate, and the cruelest truth, you signed up willingly. Every dating app is a panoptic gallery masquerading as romance. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, these aren't pathways to connection, they're behavioral conditioning rigs for male performance dread. Men broadcast, primp, and self-censor on the fly, while women flick through invisibly, untraceable, like deities in the void. Post a gym mirror shot, vain, no photo at all, detached. Write, "I enjoy travel and tacos." Genetic, cite Marcus Aurelius, overcompensating. There's no victory, only constant adjustment, self-suppression, and eventual withdrawal. This isn't pursuit, it's mental combat dressed in smileys. I once knew a man, call him Marcus, who shared a picture of himself with a book, Meditations of All Things. A woman responded, "Adorable, but do you actually read it, or is this just for the vibe?" He pulled the image. Weeks passed with no posts. When he returned with a mountain trail photo, another woman remarked, "You seem guarded. Have you worked through your pain?" Marcus is now unattached, abstinent, and training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Sharp move. He saw the real conflict wasn't on the app. It was his psyche, occupied by the demand for female validation. Foucault's panopticon wasn't just a prison design. It was a metaphor for social control through visibility. The genius of the panopticon, the prisoner never knows if he's being watched, so he behaves as if he is. Constant surveillance produces self-policing. And today, women abetted by feminist institutions, HR departments, and social media algorithms have weaponized this principle to create a digital panopticon where men are perpetually on display. You speak at work. Tongue policing, you disagree, aggressive, you stay quiet? Disengaged, no move is safe because the rules are unwritten, shifting, and enforced by emotional blackmail. I once watched a man in a meeting try to present data on productivity. Mid-sentence, a female colleague cut in, "I just feel like this ignores the emotional labor women do." He paused. She didn't. He lost the floor. Not because her point was logical, emotional labor isn't a metric, but because her interruption carried the weight of gynocentric privilege. She wasn't debating, she was dominating. This is not miscommunication. It's microaggression as frame control. She didn't want to discuss, she wanted to own the space. And when a man resists, when he speaks truth about female nature, hypergamy, deception, emotional volatility, he's not debated, he's exiled, called toxic, misogynist, abusive. This is the red pill test. The moment you name the game, the panopticon alarms go off. I've seen men lose jobs, friendships, even access to their children for saying things like women value status over character, or most divorces are initiated by women. These aren't opinions, they're facts. CDZ data shows women initiate 70% of divorces. Studies confirm hypergamy is real. Women consistently marry up in status, income, and education. Yet to state this is to be labeled a woman hater. Why? Because truth dismantles the illusion of female innocence, the foundational myth of gynocentrism. The establishment doesn't fear violence, it fears clarity. A man who sees the matrix cannot be controlled. That's why the panopticon exists, to keep men confused, guilty, and silent. So what's the remedy? Counter institutions, male-only spaces, truth guilds, virtue brotherhoods, places where the panopticon is dismantled, where men can speak without fear, train in logic, recover the trivium, and rebuild moral clarity. I run one such group. We meet weekly, no phones, no women, just iron sharpening iron. We debate, we lift, we read the Stoics, we call each other out with love. No one interrupts, no one weaponizes tears. We've had men show up broken, divorced, bankrupt, alienated from kids, only to rebuild their lives in 6 months. Not with therapy pets or antidepressants, but with truth, discipline, and brotherhood. One man, a former Google engineer, said, "For 10 years, I thought I was defective because I couldn't connect emotionally. Now I realize I was being gaslit by a system designed to make me doubt myself." He's now a black belt, a mentor, and dating a woman who respects boundaries because he set them. The panopticon of femininity is not inevitable. It is a construct, a con, a conspiracy of silence enforced by emotional terrorism and institutional cowardice. But it can be shattered by logic, by courage, by men who refuse to be data points. You are not a specimen. You are not a profile. You are not a supplicant at the altar of female choice. You are a man. And the first act of rebellion is to stop self-censoring, speak, train, build. Withdraw your consent from the circus. Create spaces where truth isn't punished but worshipped. The living spirit of Western civilization didn't die. It's waiting for you to reclaim it. I remember the exact moment I realized language had been weaponized against men, sitting in a coffee shop, listening to a woman berate her boyfriend for toxic masculinity because he dared suggest she'd forgotten their plans again. He stuttered, apologetic, while she wielded phrases like emotional labor and gaslighting, like a priest brandishing holy water against a demon. And I thought, this isn't conversation, this is exorcism, and he's the possessed. That's when it hit me. The left, feminists, the whole cathedral of cultural Marxism, they don't win debates. They redefine the words, poison the grammar, and then accuse you of sinning against your own tongue. They've turned English into a minefield where every honest statement gets flagged as abuse, while their lies glide under the radar on the wings of emotionally loaded jargon. But we can disarm the minds. We can reclaim speech, not with rage, but with precision. The kind of grammar that names a cheater, a manipulator, and a linguistic terrorist exactly what she is. Because before we can fight the lie, we must name it clearly, coldly, grammatically. The restoration of the trivium, logic, rhetoric, grammar as swords against the lie. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Nietzsche. And yet, today, millions of men have no why, only Netflix, nootropics, and the hollow echo of a woman's voice saying, "You're not enough." I watched a TikTok once, not because I enjoy the degenerate sewer of performative femininity, but because I study The Enemy, where a woman in yoga pants told young men, "Stop trying to fix women. Fix yourself." The comments were flooded with "This hit different, pathetic. You don't fix yourself into being worthy of a woman who lies, cheats, aborts, and then calls you emotionally abusive for questioning her lifestyle choices. That's not self-improvement. That's Stockholm Syndrome with protein powder." The truth is simpler. You don't need fixing, you need awakening. And the first scalpel of awakening is grammar, not the boring kind from 6th grade, but the metaphysical tool that cuts through the fog of feminist linguistic terrorism. When a woman says, "You're gaslighting me," because you pointed out she's been sexting her ex while calling you emotionally unavailable, she's not engaging in discourse, she's deploying a semantic landmine. Gaslighting was once a clinical term for a rare form of psychological abuse involving systematic deception. Now it's the go-to weapon for any woman who doesn't want to be held accountable for her actions. It's linguistic inflation, like the Weimar Republic of dialogue. And just as hyperinflation destroys economies, linguistic inflation destroys truth. A man who cannot name things as they are, a cheater, a liar, a manipulator, is a man already defeated. Precision in language is moral clarity. To say women are nurturing is not kindness. It's intellectual laziness, a surrender to sentimentality. The grammatically correct, biologically honest statement is, some women, under certain hormonal and social conditions, display nurturing behavior, often as a mating strategy to secure resources or emotional control. That sentence hurts. Good. Truth should hurt when you've been lying to yourself for decades. I once debated a gender studies professor online, not because I enjoy intellectual cockfighting with degenerates, but because I collect data. He claimed with a straight face that patriarchy harms men too. I replied, define patriarchy, show me its bylaws, provide membership dues, name its headquarters. Produce a single piece of empirical evidence that men as a class are oppressing other men. Silence, crickets, because patriarchy, in the feminist lexicon, is not a real institution. It's a floating signifier, a magic word conjured to explain any outcome feminists dislike. It's like saying the Illuminati did it, except the Illuminati at least have cool hats. This is where logic becomes your sword. You must master the formal fallacies, not to win arguments on Twitter, but to survive in a world where women file false domestic violence claims at 14 times the rate of false accusations in other crimes U.S. Department of Justice, where family courts award custody to mothers in over 80% of cases, regardless of fitness, Custody Research Institute, and where men are now 77% of suicides in the U.S. CDC 2023. These are not social constructs. They are facts written in blood. When a feminist says men have privilege, demand the syllogism. Privilege is not a self-evident truth, it's a rhetorical bludgeon. Ask, define privilege. What is its mechanism? How is it transmitted? Prove that I, a 35-year-old man with $40,000 in student debt and a restraining order from an ex who lied about assault, possess this magical force field of male privilege. You won't get an answer, only rage. Because their ideology collapses under scrutiny. Logic is not their friend, emotion is. That's why they rely on appeals to pity, false equivalence, and the ever-popular argumentum ad vagina, the unspoken rule that if a woman claims victimhood, all debate ends, but we are not animals, we are men, and men reason. Now consider rhetoric, not as manipulation, but as the art of truth-speaking. Watch Andrew Tate's videos. Not for the cars or the guns, those are distractions, but for the structure. The man speaks in complete sentences. Subject, verb, object. No hedging. No, I feel like, I guess, maybe. He says, you are poor because you're lazy. You are lonely because you're weak. That is not cruelty, that is diagnostic clarity. And billions watch not because he's rich, but because he speaks like a human being in a world of emotional toddlers. Compare that to the average university lecture, where professors mutter about heteronormative hegemony and intersectional subjectivities, which, translated from Marxist bingo, means I have nothing to say but need to sound smart. Rhetoric should elevate truth, not obscure it. Study Demosthenes, who overcame a speech impediment by putting rocks in his mouth and shouting over the ocean, not to impress women, but to defend Athens. Study Churchill, who rallied a dying empire with words alone. Study Jordan Peterson, who stood up to feminist bullies on national TV and said, I will not use preferred pronouns, not because he hates trans people, but because he respects meaning. These men speak to the soul, not the ID. They don't appeal to emotion, they command reason. And that is why they terrify the left. Because when a man masters rhetoric, he becomes immune to propaganda. He sees through the semantic hijacking, how love now means unconditional surrender, how equality means female supremacy, how consent is now a retroactive accusation tool. The trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric was not invented for classroom quizzes. It was forged in the fire of war, the war for the human mind. Socrates used it to dismantle sophists. Aquinas used it to reconcile faith and reason. Lincoln used it to preserve a nation. Today, it's buried under feminist sentimentality and academic gibberish. But it can be resurrected by you. This is not theory. This is survival. Every time a man is arrested for cyberflashing, because he sent a photo of his dog every time a father loses custody because he dared to question his wife's spending, every time a red-pilled man is banned from social media for stating biological facts, the trivium is our defense. We need a new academy, not brick and mortar, but digital, global, free, where men train in the ancient arts. Not to be alpha, not to get girls, but to be free, to think clearly, to speak truly, to live honorably. We will debate, write, and duel with ideas, not fists, but minds. Because civilizations are not destroyed by barbarians at the gate. They collapse from within when men forget how to think. The left knows this. That's why they attack logic as toxic masculinity, grammar as rigid, and rhetoric as mansplaining. They don't fear your muscles, they fear your mind. So train it, master the trivium. Name the demons: feminism, Marxism, cultural relativism, genocentrism, and then slay them with a sentence, a syllogism, a truth so sharp it cuts through the lies like a sword through silk. The restoration begins now, not in a lecture hall, not in a government program, here, in your mind, in your words, in your life. You think she wants truth? She wants obedience. You think the doctor cares about your pain? He's paid to pathologize your strength. You think mental health is healing. It's feminized obedience training with SSRIs for compliance. I once watched a man, 38, ex-military, 2 deployments, break down in a clinic because he hadn't slept in weeks. The therapist said, "Have you considered journaling your feelings?" Meanwhile, his wife had left him, taken the kids, and emptied the bank account. That man didn't need a journal. He needed a sword and a brotherhood. But the system handed him a crayon and told him to draw his sadness. This is not care. This is conquest by compassion, a velvet boot, where the steel one used to be. Let's cut the crap. 70% of divorces are initiated by women. 90% of family court cases favor mothers, even when evidence of alienation or abuse is clear. Men lose homes, children, life savings, then are told to be a better man. Better how? By surrendering, by paying tribute to a woman who weaponized the law like a scorpion sting. And let's talk about the real gaslighting. A species of fish called the Simachromis diagramma in Lake Tanganyika fakes submission to lure rivals into traps. Only to attack, women evolved the same instinct. Study after study shows women are more deceptive in mate selection, more strategic in emotional manipulation, more likely to exploit legal asymmetries. This isn't misogyny, it's ichthyology. And if you're still shocked, you've been marinating in the blue pill like a chicken in brine. You know what's really toxic? Pretending men and women are the same. That lie has destroyed more marriages than infidelity. That lie put men on couches confessing toxic masculinity, while women cheat, abort, divorce, and laugh with their girlfriends about the beta who still pays child support. Wake up. In Iceland, feminist paradise, male suicide is triple the female rate. In Sweden, fatherlessness is soaring and boys are failing at historic levels. Feminism didn't liberate women, it liberated women from men. And now it's busy liberating society from sanity. You think I'm angry? Good, you should be. Not because I hate women, but because I love truth. And truth is masculine. It doesn't soothe, it doesn't compromise, it doesn't cry. It cuts. So here's your red pill. Stop asking permission to be a man. Stop apologizing for your strength. Stop believing the clinic, the court, the classroom, or the dating app. Build your own world. Speak in clear sentences. Master logic so you can dismantle lies with a syllogism. Learn rhetoric so you can move crowds without begging. Use grammar so you name things as they are: cowardice, not emotional sensitivity. Manipulation, not communication style. You're not broken. You are betrayed, and the only cure is sovereignty, not isolation, not rage, but disciplined, unshakable self-rule. Train your body, sharpen your mind, guard your speech. And when the next woman tests you, asks about your past, interrupts your future, feigns trauma to trap you, look her in the eye and say, "I know what you are, and I am not your victim." And now the sponsored book introduction, Awful Feminine Archetype, Jezebel, Lilith, Delilah, all BPD on a spectrum. I spent decades watching Western civilization decay. Everywhere I looked, Relationships crumbled, families dissolved, and common sense vanished. Then I saw the pattern, the same destructive female psychopathology repeating through history. Jezebel, Lilith, Delilah, they weren't just ancient stories. They're blueprints for the borderline personality disorder epidemic infecting modern women. My own experiences confirmed it. I witnessed marriages destroyed by emotional manipulation, workplaces paralyzed by gossip, shame, rally tactics, and entire nations buckling under maternal instincts turned toxic. This isn't coincidence. It's a crisis demanding truth. This book arms you with undeniable logic to dismantle the lies killing our world. Forget feminist word games about equity or inclusion. We expose them as emotional weapons designed to evade responsibility. You'll see how women's net negative economic impact drains economies, while their mate suppression machinery emasculates men into submission. Chapters like the Demographic Destruction Manual and Economic Parasitism Unmasked reveal cold, hard data on abortion rates and consumer debt. Others, like leftism's psychopathology blueprint, trace how female-coded collectivism fuels communist tyranny. I've packed this with actionable insights, drawn from rigorous research, so you can reclaim reason in a culture drowning in tears. This is written for real men, those red-pilled warriors who cherish logic, the Western canon, and the transcendentals of truth, beauty, and goodness. If you're sick of leftist dogma and feminist deceit, this book is your toolkit. It's not for the faint-hearted or brainwashed. If you're a leftist, a die-hard feminist, or someone who thinks truth is hate speech, stop reading now, go binge Netflix, knit a sweater, or attend a sensitivity training. You'll hate what follows because it shatters your delusions. For the rest of us, buy this book. Arm yourself with the facts to crush the gynocentric lies and save civilization. Your future depends on it. Awful feminine archetype, Jezebel, Lilith, Delilah, all BPD on a spectrum. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.